A drone just exposed the royal couple's home. Now the world is asking, where are Meghan and Harry's kids? It all started with a sound no louder than a mosquito's buzz, a near-silent whir in the distance that drifted over Montecito's serene skyline. A small black dot barely visible in the California sun, it hovered over a palatial mansion tucked behind layers of hedges, stone walls, and multi-million-dollar privacy barriers. This wasn't just any house. This was the private residence of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the couple who once fled the British tabloids in pursuit of a quiet life. Ironically, that pursuit has only intensified the world's hunger for their secrets. And this time, it wasn't a paparazzo with a long lens or a leaked tabloid report that triggered the frenzy. It was a drone, and what it didn't see is what sent shockwaves across the globe. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The footage, clear, stable, and irrefutably recent, made its way online just days after it was allegedly captured by an anonymous drone operator. No flashy title, no manipulated overlays, just raw video. The camera glided over the Sussex estate like a vulture circling its prey. Yet despite the grandeur of the property, the sunlit pool, the perfectly manicured gardens, the gleaming SUVs in the driveway, something immediately struck viewers as off. Something subtle, but deeply unsettling. There were no toys, no tricycles, no playsets, no swings, no signs of children. For a household with two young children, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, the absence felt deafening. Comment sections exploded within minutes. Viewers scrutinized every frame, pausing, zooming, dissecting. "Where's the evidence of kids?" one viral comment asked. "You'd expect to see at least a bike, a sandbox, something." Another user put it bluntly, "It looks like a hotel, not a family home." These weren't just idle observations. These were the seeds of suspicion that quickly spiraled into a full-blown media storm. What followed was not just outrage or curiosity. It was a reawakening, a collective memory returning to the headlines and whispers that had, until now, been pushed aside by legal threats, royal etiquette, and media fatigue. The old rumors resurfaced with a vengeance, that Meghan had faked at least one of her pregnancies, that surrogates had been used but kept secret, that Archie and Lilibet might not even live in the same house, or perhaps might not live with them at all. And at the heart of it all was a singular question that refused to die. If these children are real, if they are truly being raised in that home, why does their environment show absolutely no trace of their existence? This wasn't just speculation for clicks or social media engagement. It was about public trust. This was about a couple who had built an empire on authenticity while accusing others of deception. It was about millions of Netflix viewers, book buyers, and Spotify listeners who had emotionally invested in a story that now showed cracks. There's a reason this matters. The Sussexes didn't just walk away from the royal family, they monetized their exit. They sold their story to the highest bidders, and their children were always central to that narrative. From Oprah's interview to Harry's memoir to their Netflix docuseries, Archie and Lilibet were framed as symbols of legacy, of healing, of escape from royal oppression. So if those symbols were misrepresented, or worse, entirely fabricated, then the entire brand they've built begins to crumble under its own weight. But before we rush to judgment, let's step back. Why did this drone matter more than any tabloid story? Why did the world suddenly pause and consider what might really be going on behind the mansion's stone walls and rose gardens? The answer lies not in what the drone saw, but in what it didn't see. In journalism, omission is often more revealing than confession. And in this case, the sterile emptiness of a supposed family yard spoke louder than any press release or photo op ever could. To understand the full scope of this mystery, we have to examine not just the drone footage itself, but the context surrounding it. The timing, the geography, the long-standing inconsistencies in Meghan's pregnancy photos, the children's extremely limited and questionable public appearances, the staffers who left under strange circumstances, the persistent refusal to share basic details that other public figures, even royals, have historically been expected to share. We also need to look at who released this footage and why. Was this a random intrusion into private life, or a carefully orchestrated leak by someone with insider access? Some suspect Tyler Perry, whose Montecito estate once served as the Sussexes' safe haven, may have had a falling out with the couple and chose to pull back the curtain on the very lifestyle he once protected. Others believe the footage came from an investigative tabloid, skirting legal boundaries to expose what they claim is a house of mirrors. Whatever the origin, the result is the same, a tidal wave of doubt. It's important to recognize the stakes here. This isn't just about whether a couple owns a stroller. This is about potential fraud, emotional, financial, and institutional. If it's true that Meghan and Harry exaggerated or entirely fabricated aspects of their children's lives, the fallout could be enormous. Not just lawsuits or public backlash, but a complete reevaluation of how modern royalty operates outside of the palace and how media platforms have blindly enabled them. This also raises ethical questions for viewers and media consumers. At what point does privacy give way to public accountability, especially for individuals who have repeatedly leveraged their private lives for public gain? When Meghan and Harry sat down with Oprah, they made it clear their story was meant to inform, inspire, and change the conversation. But if parts of that story were built on illusion, then that conversation shifts from empathy to accountability. Some argue the drone violated privacy laws, and that may well be true. But others argue it was the first authentic look at a home that has only ever been seen through curated content and legal walls. It's the modern version of investigative journalism, not through paper documents, but through pixels in the sky. And the footage, unsettling as it is, presents a legitimate visual contradiction to the Sussexes' long-standing claims. As we prepare to dive deeper into this unfolding drama, you'll see how the drone footage is just the tip of the iceberg. We'll follow the clues back through a web of secrecy, silence, and strategic storytelling. We'll hear from experts in child development, royal protocol, drone forensics, and media ethics. We'll explore the origin of the footage, the media's reaction, the palace's eerie silence, and what this could mean for the Sussexes' future, both legally and reputationally. And most importantly, we'll ask the question that can no longer be ignored. If Archie and Lilibet are part of this story, if they truly live behind those gates, then where are the footprints? The chaos? The joyful mess that defines every childhood? Because in a world where image is everything and reality is easy to manufacture, sometimes the absence of truth is the most revealing image of all. It began like most modern controversies, with a quiet leak and a sudden storm. There was no build-up, no press teaser, no insider quote to pre-frame the narrative. Just a digital upload, plain, unmarked, and seemingly innocent. A 38-second clip titled only with a timestamp and GPS coordinates. But what it contained would ignite an international firestorm and drag the Sussexes back into the center of a media cyclone that rivals anything they endured in the United Kingdom. The footage opens with a bird's-eye view of Montecito. Rolling hills, secluded driveways, rows of eucalyptus trees bending in the breeze. The drone hovers momentarily, stabilizing its lens. Then, slowly, it begins to descend, its camera trained with surgical precision on a sprawling estate, elegant but defensive in posture. High walls, arched gates, and a driveway that curves like a question mark. At first glance, it could be any celebrity mansion nestled in this part of Santa Barbara County. But a closer look reveals details that leave no doubt. This is the Sussex residence. The drone glides effortlessly toward the home, and here's where everything changes. As the camera shifts from the grandeur of the architecture to the private grounds, an eerie clarity emerges. The tennis court is immaculate. The gardens are pristinely trimmed. A gardener pushes a leaf blower in the background, oblivious to the presence above. And yet, in a house reportedly occupied by two small children, Archie, aged 5, and Lilibet, aged 3, there is a jarring absence. No colorful play sets. No miniature picnic tables. No ride-on toy cars. No bouncy castles, no sandboxes, no kiddie pools. Not even a plastic ball resting in a corner. The drone passes the pool area, where clean white lounge chairs line up like soldiers. Not a floatie in sight. The windows are large, with open views into the house's grand interior, and again, nothing. No high chairs. No stuffed animals. No children's artwork taped to the sliding glass doors. The footage is clinical, dispassionate. But its impact is explosive. When the video hit the internet, first posted on a relatively obscure Reddit thread dedicated to analyzing royal media, it took only hours to spread like wildfire. Within a day, it had migrated to Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, where millions of views accumulated. Amateur analysts dissected it frame by frame. Influencers with experience in drone videography authenticated the angle and light conditions, verifying it as real. Former paparazzi photographers swore they recognized the property's perimeter. There was no credible denial that the house in question was indeed Harry and Meghan's. But if that was the case, where were the signs of life that two young children would inevitably leave behind? This wasn't about catching a moment when the children happened to be at school or napping indoors. This was about the absence of any indication that children lived there at all. One mother with two toddlers made a now viral video saying, "I can clean my house 1,000 times, and there's still a toy truck in the flower bed. Kids leave traces. It's not just probable, it's unavoidable." Public reaction split swiftly into two camps. On one side were those who decried the footage as an invasion of privacy, a grotesque overreach into the private lives of two individuals who had long said they simply wanted to be left alone. On the other side were those who argued that Harry and Meghan made their home and their children a part of their public brand, through Netflix, Spotify, and memoirs, and that transparency comes with that territory. And it wasn't just trolls and anonymous keyboard critics. Blue-check journalists, child psychologists, and cultural commentators weighed in. The debate turned nuclear when a well-known parenting columnist tweeted, "I'm not saying the kids don't exist. I'm saying that for a couple who profits off family life, the lack of visible family presence is weird. Full stop." That tweet alone received over 250,000 likes and was shared by both celebrity gossip accounts and mainstream journalists. More disturbing still was the reaction from people who had always given Meghan and Harry the benefit of the doubt. These were the fans who had defended them during the Oprah interview, who bought Harry's book, Spare, who watched the Netflix docuseries and posted crying selfies as Meghan described feeling suicidal. But now, those same fans were expressing a kind of quiet betrayal. One viewer posted a stitched TikTok comparing drone footage of other celebrity homes known to have children: Chrissy Teigen, Ryan Reynolds, Kim Kardashian. In every example, the backyards told a clear story. Toys, playhouses, paint-streaked walls, drawings hung on sliding doors. "Even when they're not home," she said, "you see them. You feel their presence." Meghan and Harry's place? It looks like an Airbnb. The suspicion wasn't born from hatred. It was born from contradiction. Harry and Meghan had gone to painstaking lengths to control their public narrative. And central to that narrative were Archie and Lilibet, from their protected names to the alleged refusal of royal titles, to the heart-wrenching claims about racism and birth certificates. These were not passive omissions. These were carefully broadcast elements of their story. The children weren't hidden from the world. They were leveraged. They were, in many ways, at the emotional core of the Sussex brand. And yet here was visual proof, in 4K clarity, suggesting that those very children might not live in the very home that their parents so often referenced as their sanctuary, their safe haven, their refuge from royal cruelty. Soon, larger media outlets began reaching out to analysts. Drone law experts were called in. A former BBC investigative reporter made a scathing appearance on a UK talk show saying, "This is what happens when people curate every image. They forget the power of the candid." Speculation deepened when internet sleuths began comparing the drone footage to Meghan and Harry's Netflix documentary. In one sequence, Meghan walks outside the house with Lilibet, who toddles across the lawn. But a freeze-frame comparison of the drone footage versus the documentary raised eyebrows. The lawn is different. The stonework is arranged in another pattern. Some claim the documentary used an entirely different property, a stand-in for their real home. If so, why? Meanwhile, official response from the Sussex team was non-existent. No denial. No confirmation. No statement about whether the footage was legitimate or manipulated. That silence was perhaps the most deafening part of all. By week's end, a former Sussex staff member anonymously told a London tabloid, "I can't speak to whether the kids live there or not, but I will say we were instructed to never refer to toys, cribs, or anything child-related when guests came to visit. It was always about presentation, not reality." This quote, despite being unattributed, sent shockwaves through royal circles. And it set the tone for what came next, not just questions about drone legality or speculation about Harry's parenting, but full-scale investigations into what may be the biggest mystery surrounding the most talked-about couple in the modern monarchy. So why did this drone footage matter? Because in one single sweep, it reframed the narrative. It took a story most had dismissed as a conspiracy, the notion that Archie and Lilibet might not be living with their parents, and it offered visual support. It reminded the public that even the most carefully curated stories can be dismantled not by an exposé, but by an accidental glimpse through an open window. The footage didn't accuse. It didn't editorialize. It didn't point fingers. but it allowed viewers to really see, what the home of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle looks like in the daylight, when no handlers are present, no camera crew has prepared the scene, and no press release is shaping perception. And what viewers saw was not a family home. They saw a shell. The footage might be only 38 seconds long, but its implications are far-reaching. It calls into question years of photos, statements, denials, and emotional appeals. It resurrects old rumors about surrogacy, about deception, about strategic omission. And it sets the stage for a deeper question that this story must now confront. What else have we not seen? In the hours following the release of the drone footage over the Sussexes' Montecito estate, speculation about what the camera revealed was quickly rivaled by questions about who had authorized or facilitated the drone flight in the first place. Montecito is not a place where privacy is taken lightly. Homes are built into hillsides, concealed behind hedges that seem as thick as castle walls. Security teams patrol perimeters. Aerial photography, unless done by licensed operators for real estate or authorized press, is typically shut down fast, often by private security teams who are on call 24 hours a day. So how did a drone manage to get so close, capture such clear footage, and more suspiciously, make it out without triggering alarms, lawsuits, or interception? It didn't take long for fingers to begin pointing in one particular direction: Tyler Perry. The public's relationship with Tyler Perry has long been shaped by two conflicting images. On one side, he's the billionaire media mogul known for his rags-to-riches story, his control over a massive Atlanta studio complex, and his ability to single-handedly write, direct, and produce a media empire. On the other, he is famously loyal. A man who once said that relationships, both personal and professional, are sacred and not to be betrayed lightly. That is what made the speculation so shocking. Because just a few years earlier, Tyler Perry was not only a trusted friend to Harry and Meghan, he was, at one point, their only sanctuary. When Harry and Meghan made their explosive decision to step back from royal duties and leave the UK, they fled to North America in what many saw as an emotional and logistical panic. They were vulnerable. They were hunted by the press. And they were technically homeless. Tyler Perry offered them the security they needed. He opened the doors to his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion and reportedly funded their protection at a time when Harry's own royal security had been cut off. He provided the couple with not just a place to live, but cover from a hostile media and a globally polarized public. By all accounts, Perry had no reason to turn on them. Unless something had shifted beneath the surface. The suggestion that he may have allowed or even facilitated the drone footage rattled those who had seen him as an unwavering ally to the Sussexes. But when the footage first appeared, its origin was traced to a signal geotagged not from Montecito, but from an intermediary location linked to a known drone photography firm that had previously partnered with production teams in Los Angeles, some of whom had been contracted by Perry Studios. That alone wasn't damning. But a deeper digital trail, examined by open-source intelligence specialists and rogue digital sleuths on Reddit and X, formerly Twitter, discovered something more curious. The metadata embedded in the original video file bore a signature that appeared in previous behind-the-scenes footage of Perry's own productions. While metadata can be altered, this detail set off alarms among those trained to detect authentic leaks versus manufactured ones. Further deepening the suspicion was the fact that Perry had been conspicuously absent from public support of Meghan and Harry for nearly a year. While he had once spoken glowingly of Meghan's resilience, and even stood in as Lilibet's godfather according to unconfirmed reports, his social media accounts had not featured a single mention of the couple in over 14 months. For a man known to be publicly affectionate with his friends and collaborators, this silence felt unnatural. Fueling the theory even more was a vague post Perry made on Instagram just days before the drone footage went viral. It read simply, "Sometimes you help people through the fire just to watch them set your kindness ablaze." The post featured no image, no tags, no reference to a specific person. But the timing and the language sent the internet spiraling into detective mode. Had Perry fallen out with Meghan and Harry? Had a betrayal occurred behind the scenes? Was this drone footage not just an exposé, but a message? A longtime entertainment journalist who had interviewed Perry multiple times over the past decade weighed in during a podcast interview, stating, "Tyler isn't someone who seeks revenge in the usual Hollywood way. But if he believes he's been misused, he'll correct the narrative, subtly, surgically, and without warning." The implication was clear. If Perry had grown disillusioned with the Sussexes' behavior, he wouldn't explode in a tabloid. He would simply lift the curtain. What could cause such a shift? Several theories began to emerge. One centered around Perry's reported discomfort with how the Sussexes leveraged his generosity for PR purposes. According to insiders, Perry had expected his role to remain private, but was blindsided when Harry and Meghan mentioned his help during the Oprah interview. Tyler didn't want to be a headline, said one former associate. He wanted to be a helper, not a plot point. Another theory suggested that Perry may have grown concerned about the way the Sussexes were presenting their narrative, particularly around their children. Perry, who was known for philanthropic work with children's charities and support for vulnerable families, may have viewed the alleged manipulation of a parental image, especially if it involved deception or omission, as a step too far. He's very sensitive to the exploitation of children for media gain, one source noted. If he felt misled, he wouldn't react publicly. He'd do something far more surgical, quiet, devastating. There were, of course, legal implications swirling around the possibility of Perry's involvement. If proven true that he facilitated drone surveillance, even of his own former property, it could place him in violation of California's strict aerial privacy laws. But here's the twist. If Perry still owned the land where the drone operator stood, or had access rights to it, the legality shifts. There are ways this footage could have been obtained legally. If Perry consented, if he coordinated, if he signed off in a way that skirted conventional boundaries. That's why experts on both sides of the Atlantic began demanding clarity. Why had Harry and Meghan not issued a statement condemning the drone footage? Why had they not directly addressed the origin, the invasion of privacy, or the implications? Why had Tyler Perry, a man once so vocally supportive, said absolutely nothing? Silence, in these cases, often carries weight. It is not absence. It is signal. Other signs of a rift began to emerge as well. Paparazzi photos taken months earlier showed Meghan attending a Los Angeles charity event without Perry, despite his direct involvement in the same foundation. At a recent gala hosted by Perry Studios, Meghan and Harry were reportedly invited, then quietly uninvited after sponsors expressed concern over optics. These are not the hallmarks of a solid friendship. These are signs of a fracture. Still, skeptics argue that Perry has too much to lose by betraying the Sussexes. His brand is built on faith, discretion, and respect, not scandal. But those who know him best say Perry isn't driven by fear. He's driven by control. And if he believed the Sussexes had misused their platform or manipulated public perception in ways that implicated him, he might have decided that the truth, or at least a glimpse of it, needed to surface. One industry veteran, speaking anonymously, said it plainly. He wouldn't leak it to hurt them. He'd leak it to reclaim the narrative, to distance himself without saying a word. If that's true, it's a masterstroke. The footage says everything without saying anything. It shows a home absent of children's life. It suggests, subtly, devastatingly, that the Sussexes' narrative may not be as solid as it once appeared. And it does so without Tyler Perry ever needing to speak a single sentence. And what if Perry wasn't involved at all? What if this is all speculative, coincidental timing, and a paranoid public connecting dots that don't exist? That possibility still leaves another question. Why hasn't he denied it? In the media world, timing is everything. Silence is rarely accidental. And this silence, from Perry, from the Sussexes, from their entire PR apparatus, is speaking volumes. Whether or not Tyler Perry personally greenlit the drone flight, whether he dropped the footage or merely allowed it to reach the world, his involvement or perceived association has reframed him in the public eye from loyal protector to potential whistleblower. And in doing so, he's inadvertently or deliberately opened the door to a wider truth the world is now desperate to uncover. Was this an act of exposure? A warning? A quiet severing of ties? Or was it the first real look behind the walls, offered not by enemies, but by a friend who could no longer keep silent? Within 24 hours of the drone footage hitting the internet, the question, "Where are the kids?" transformed from a casual observation to a global chorus. It started as murmurs and comment threads, isolated remarks under Reddit posts, or TikTok stitches reacting to the now viral flyover clip. But it quickly gained momentum. On Instagram, royal gossip accounts began posting side-by-side comparisons of other celebrity family homes, complete with swings, trampolines, finger-painted glass doors, contrasted with the oddly sterile Sussex residence. Twitter, as always, amplified the volume. A single tweet reading "not one toy, not one," was reposted more than 60,000 times in 48 hours. What set this wave apart from typical royal gossip was its source: ordinary people. Not just palace critics or anti-Sussex pundits. This time, it was mothers, fathers, school teachers, nannies, daycare workers, people who knew what a house with children actually looked like. They weren't theorizing about constitutional succession or the politics of the firm. They were simply saying, "This doesn't add up." "I'm a mom of 3, one viral post read. "You can bleach the house daily, but good luck getting that kiddie pool folded neatly or hiding all the chalk drawings from the sidewalk." A preschool teacher commented, "When kids live somewhere, they leave a trace. Always. It's not a matter of class or lifestyle. It's human behavior. Even billionaire kids leave Legos in weird places." The tone of these comments wasn't inherently cruel, at least not at first. The initial reactions weren't accusations. They were confusion. Genuine puzzlement. How could a couple who had built so much of their public image around family life, around parenthood and protecting their children, live in a home that looked more like a luxury rental than a bustling family sanctuary? On TikTok, content creators began running analysis videos, pausing each frame of the drone footage to search for even the smallest sign of childlike presence: a garden shovel, a splash of color, a deflated beach ball. Nothing. One creator made a 12-part series on just the outdoor layout of the property, explaining how even architectural choices typically reflect the presence of children. "Where's the safety gate near the pool? Where's the turf that doesn't scratch toddler knees? Where's the tiny scooter abandoned halfway down the path?" she asked. Her tone was not mocking. It was surgical. As the hours passed, tone began to shift. What started as curiosity curdled into doubt. And doubt, left unchecked, metastasized into something more powerful: betrayal. Because this wasn't the first time people had felt they were being shown a filtered version of Meghan and Harry's reality. This wasn't the first moment the public was asked to squint and make assumptions about the Sussexes' children. From the moment Archie was born, Meghan and Harry had walked a razor-thin line between protection and obfuscation. They declined to share hospital photos. They withheld the names of godparents. They released portraits long after events had passed. And each time, they gave a reason: security. But now, faced with the stark absence revealed by the drone, people began to question whether those reasons were legitimate or simply a cover for something else. A flood of archived footage began recirculating, Meghan bending over in ways that suggested a suspiciously pliable baby bump, photos that seemed to show her pregnant belly changing shape or position, clips from Harry and Meghan on Netflix where Lilibet appeared in shadow or silhouette only. Comments Harry made in his memoir about feeling disconnected during Meghan's pregnancies suddenly took on a new, ominous subtext. Even more striking was the re-examination of their media strategy. In Oprah's now infamous interview, Meghan tearfully described the trauma of her time as a royal, a time defined, she claimed, by fears over Archie's skin tone and deliberate attempts to deny him a royal title. But now, critics were asking, how could the world reconcile such a powerful defense of her motherhood with a home that appeared entirely devoid of child-centric life? And it wasn't just civilians sounding the alarm. Celebrities who had previously supported the Sussexes began posting cryptic messages, or at the very least, falling suspiciously silent. A few weeks earlier, Meghan had been photographed dining with Ellen DeGeneres, a longtime friend and Montecito neighbor. But when Ellen was asked in an interview whether she had seen the kids recently, she dodged the question entirely. "I've been out of town," she said. "Haven't seen much of anyone lately." That one phrase, "haven't seen much of anyone," was clipped, shared, and replayed across platforms, dissected for clues. Why dodge a softball question? Why not simply say, "Yes, they're wonderful"? The shift was subtle but significant. Silence, once again, became suspicious. Then came the analysts and commentators. Tabloids, of course, were quick to pounce, running front-page stories with titles like "Where are Archie and Lilibet?" or "Inside the House with No Crayons." But mainstream outlets cautiously entered the discussion, framing it less as a scandal and more as a cultural phenomenon. This speaks to a deeper issue, one BBC commentator noted. It's not about drone footage. It's about the public's desire for authenticity and the perception that Meghan and Harry might have crossed into the realm of performance. And that's where things got truly explosive. Because the Sussexes weren't just private citizens caught in a viral mystery. They were media entrepreneurs. They had signed multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix, Spotify, and Penguin Random House based largely on the strength of their personal story. That story hinged not just on their escape from royal life, but on the construction of a new family legacy, one that was deeply tied to their children. Archie's birth was described as redemptive. Lilibet's name was positioned as a nod to royal continuity and maternal heritage. They were more than children. They were narrative tools, woven into the Sussexes' media arc like characters in a carefully constructed epic. And now the public was being forced to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. What if those characters had been exaggerated, or worse, invented? That question wasn't asked by conspiracy theorists alone. Former royal correspondents who had once defended Meghan's privacy began voicing concern. "I don't want to believe anything is being hidden," one wrote, "but this footage is difficult to explain. Not even a garden hose that's been knocked over by a toddler." The reactions weren't uniform. Some commentators tried to push back, suggesting that Meghan and Harry were simply extremely disciplined about tidiness. Others argued that drone footage offered only a snapshot, and that it was unfair to extrapolate too much from what could have been filmed during nap time or a rare moment when the kids were elsewhere. But those defenses began to crumble under the weight of one undeniable reality. The Sussexes themselves were refusing to address it. Days passed. Then a week. No statements. No denials. No carefully worded PR clarifications. No cease and desist notices. This, perhaps more than anything, drove public perception further into the shadows. If this was an invasion of privacy, why weren't they fighting back? If it was a false narrative, why weren't they correcting it? Into that silence poured more questions, more doubt, more frustration. One YouTube commentator, whose breakdown of the Oprah interview had racked up millions of views, summed up the sentiment in a single line: "We're not mad at Meghan and Harry. We're mad that we might have believed something that wasn't true." The idea of betrayal is uniquely potent in today's media culture. People don't just watch celebrities, they root for them. They project onto them. They believe in the stories they're told, especially when those stories revolve around perseverance, redemption, and family. Meghan and Harry had, for years, positioned themselves as survivors of a cruel institution. But now, faced with the most basic question a parent can be asked, "Where are your children?" they had chosen not to answer. And that choice was interpreted by many as damning. Of course, not everyone joined the backlash. Some fans remained fiercely loyal, arguing that no amount of drone footage could undermine the Sussexes' testimony. "They don't owe us a jungle gym in the yard," one fan posted. "They owe their kids privacy." End of story. But these voices, though still present, were increasingly drowned out by those asking how privacy could coexist with podcast discussions about lullabies, Netflix scenes of bath time, or dramatic retellings of hospital trauma. It's not that the public demands perfection, but it demands consistency. And in the world of high-profile storytelling, especially when that storytelling is monetized, perceived inconsistencies trigger something primal. I need to know. I need to verify. I need to see the truth with one's own eyes. So as the drone footage continued to circulate, racking up millions of views, the question, "Where are the kids?" stopped being rhetorical. It became an accusation. And then it became a cultural reckoning. Because if this question goes unanswered much longer, it won't just be about Archie and Lilibet. It will be about trust, about media, about how far people are willing to go to believe a story, and how deep the disappointment cuts when that belief is betrayed. To fully understand why the drone footage created such a violent ripple across global media and public consciousness, one must trace the history of Archie and Lilibet's presence, or, more precisely, their absence. From the moment they were born, their visibility, or lack thereof, was never accidental. It was curated, deliberate, and carefully rationed in a way that always left the public asking questions instead of receiving answers. The timeline of their public appearances, or hints thereof, tells a deeper story. It's not about what the public has seen. It's about what they haven't. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born on May 6, 2019. His arrival was met with international curiosity and emotional investment. Here was the first biracial child born into the highest echelons of the British royal family, a symbol of a new generation, a new face of monarchy, and a fresh start for a family struggling to stay relevant in the 21st century. The press anticipated a traditional royal rollout, hospital steps, a public photo call, a smiling couple holding their child as generations before had done. Instead, what they got was something else entirely. Harry and Meghan declined the standard photo call outside the hospital, a tradition that goes back decades. Instead, they released heavily controlled images 2 days later from Windsor Castle. The lighting was dim. Meghan's outfit was formal. Archie's face was partially obscured, swaddled so tightly that even his hair wasn't visible. The public got a glimpse, but not a look. That subtle difference would define the Sussexes' approach to their children from that point forward. In the weeks that followed, Archie all but disappeared. No public outings. No casual paparazzi sightings. No stroller walks through the parks, no glimpses from balcony windows. The palace released a black and white photo of Meghan cradling Archie's tiny foot in celebration of Mother's Day. Another of Harry holding Archie facing away from the camera for Father's Day. Each was artistically staged, almost cinematic in its detachment. The message was clear: you may see parts of our life, but never the full picture. Critics and fans alike noticed a pattern. Photos were often grayscale. Faces turned away. Hands only. A foot. A shadow. For a couple who claimed to seek privacy, this made sense. But then came the paradox. While limiting visibility, the Sussexes were actively selling their story. Meghan's interview with Tom Bradby. The sit-down with Oprah. Harry's memoir, Spare. The Netflix documentary. These platforms all centered around the theme of trauma, healing, and family, especially the children, who were repeatedly invoked as the reason behind every decision they made. So where were they? As time went on, the few moments that did feature Archie or Lilibet began to seem more suspicious than satisfying. On their 2020 Christmas card, the couple released a digital painting, a stylized, cartoon-like illustration of their family, rather than a photograph. Archie was drawn mid-laugh, seated between his parents, who appeared to be in a cozy cottage. The illustration raised eyebrows. Why not a real photo? What was being hidden? By 2021, the public's hunger for even the faintest glimpse of the children had grown ravenous. In June of that year, Lilibet Diana was born. Once again, no hospital photos. No casual snapshots. No first official portraits. For months, the public wondered whether she would be introduced at all. Then, in December 2021, Harry and Meghan released their first official photo of Lilibet as part of their Christmas card. Taken at their home in Montecito, the image featured Meghan holding Lilibet in the air while Harry and Archie looked on. Lilibet, wearing a tiny white dress, smiled at the camera. But even then, speculation persisted. The lighting was soft, the resolution odd, and the image itself appeared heavily processed. Detractors claimed the photo looked AI-generated or digitally manipulated. Supporters dismissed the allegations as conspiracy. But once again, the doubts were not dispelled, they were simply paused. The timeline gets murkier after that. In early 2022, Harry and Meghan kept an exceptionally low profile with the children. Lilibet's birthday came and went with only private celebrations. A photograph taken during her birthday party, reportedly on the Sussex lawn, was released to select outlets. But here too, things didn't sit right. The only known guests photographed were distant friends and one known photographer with a pre-existing relationship with Meghan. The image, showing Lilibet in a blue dress, kneeling in the grass, was lovely, but again, heavily curated. No context. No candidates. No other children in the frame. Then came the Netflix documentary in late 2022. Titled simply Harry and Meghan, it was billed as the couple's true story, a chance for them to control their own narrative. This 6-part series included a smattering of family footage, some of which featured the children. Viewers were treated to fleeting clips of Archie speaking, walking with Harry, or watching hummingbirds with Meghan. Lilibet was shown crawling, toddling through grass, and clapping at birthday balloons. But each of these moments felt oddly staged. One sequence showed Lilibet reaching toward a birthday cake, but the camera angle only ever caught her from behind. In another, Archie was reading a book. But the footage cut abruptly as he turned toward the lens. Audio was often overlaid, blurring the children's voices with soft music or narrative voiceovers. Every moment was just enough to imply presence, but not enough to verify consistency. And perhaps that was the point. It's during this documentary that many viewers began to feel an odd sense of disconnection. These weren't the glimpses of a chaotic, joyful family life. These were polished fragments. Nothing spontaneous. No dirty hands, no scraped knees, no meltdowns. It was a family life too perfect to believe, and in its perfection, deeply suspicious. By early 2023, the Sussexes seemed to understand the tide was shifting. There were murmurs of skepticism in the press. Pundits began questioning the children's schooling, the absence of reports from local teachers or neighbors. California is not a place where celebrity kids go unnoticed. And yet, no teachers, babysitters, or fellow parents ever claimed to have seen Archie or Lilibet at playgroups, parks, or public events. Not even the occasional blurred paparazzi photo hinted at their presence. Contrast that with other celebrity children, kids of Hollywood actors, music stars, even billionaires. Despite high levels of security, children are seen. Their faces may be blurred, but their existence is unquestioned. They're caught by accident on a beach, photographed boarding a plane, snapped through tinted car windows. The complete erasure of the Sussex children from this same sphere began to feel unnatural. Then came Harry's memoir Spare, released in January 2023. The book offered new insights into Harry's life, including his struggles with fatherhood, his emotional detachment during Meghan's pregnancies, and his desire to break generational cycles. But oddly, the children themselves played only a symbolic role. There were no detailed stories of Archie's personality, no anecdotes about parenting mishaps, no vivid scenes of Lilibet's early milestones. Everything about the children was broad, thematic, and void of texture. This absence stood in stark contrast to Harry's emotionally graphic recounting of his military service, his drug use, and even his frostbitten penis. Why share all that and yet shield his children's personalities like state secrets? By mid-2023, theories gained traction again. Photos released for Lilibet's second birthday showed only the back of her head. Meghan was seen in public several times in Los Angeles, but always without her children. Harry attended events, gave interviews, launched initiatives again, always alone. There were no family strolls, no Starbucks runs with strollers, no candid airport photos. It was as if the children had been conceptually placed into the Sussex narrative but never physically present in the world around them. The final known appearance, or at least suggestion, of the children came in early 2024. A blurry photograph was allegedly taken of Meghan and two children at a private park in Santa Barbara. The image, released by a tabloid, was almost immediately dismissed as staged. The children's faces were turned, the clothing didn't match prior images, and no one could confirm the source. Even more telling, the Sussex legal team did not move to block or sue over the image's publication, an unusual choice for a couple known to be litigious over unauthorized media. And that brings us back to the present. The drone footage. The backyard that resembles a showroom. The windows reflecting carefully chosen decor, not lived-in clutter. Not a Lego out of place. Not a sock. Not a swing. When placed in context, the footage becomes less of a revelation and more of a confirmation. It validates a growing suspicion that's been building quietly for years. That the children, so central to the Sussexes' media identity, have somehow been kept just out of reach, not for safety, not for privacy, but for control. The timeline of Archie and Lilibet's visibility isn't a straight line. It's a series of curated bursts, moments of light followed by long stretches of darkness. And every time that light flickered on, it showed only what Meghan and Harry wanted the world to see. Nothing more. Nothing spontaneous. Nothing alive. Which begs the question, have we ever truly seen Archie and Lilibet at all? From the very beginning, the narrative surrounding Meghan Markle's pregnancies was unlike anything the royal family or the world had ever seen. While past royal births were traditionally accompanied by public appearances, hospital steps photo ops, and direct interactions with the press, Meghan and Harry chose a route shrouded in secrecy, personal control, and calculated image management. What may have initially seemed like a reasonable demand for privacy slowly evolved into a mystery, then a controversy, and now, in light of the drone footage and broader doubts about the children's visibility, into a full-blown cultural investigation. Surrogacy rumors didn't begin with conspiracy theorists. They began, subtly, with images, visual contradictions that couldn't be explained away easily. The first questions emerged in late 2018, when Meghan appeared at various public engagements visibly pregnant with Archie. At first, it was standard fare, hand on belly, soft maternity wear, the usual tabloid praise and speculation. But then came the viral videos. One in particular captured Meghan bending down in a deep squat during a visit to a charity. Her stomach folded unnaturally, appearing to collapse inward, an effect that left many viewers frozen in confusion. Pregnant women don't move like that. One woman posted in a Twitter thread that received over 100,000 likes. not at 7 months. A YouTube clip slowed the footage down, highlighting how the shape of Meghan's belly seemed to change, even shrink, as she crouched. Other images began circulating showing inconsistencies, a prominent bump in one photo appearing significantly smaller just days later, a photo where the bump seemed disproportionately high or off-centered. Skeptics began comparing her movements to other public figures who had carried pregnancies. Side-by-side videos featured Kate Middleton, Beyoncé, and Serena Williams, showing the typical rigidity, balance adjustments, and caution in movements. Meghan, on the other hand, was walking in stilettos, kneeling, leaning forward with ease, and often placing her hands around her bump in what some described as a performative, overly theatrical manner. Initially, these observations were dismissed as rude, invasive, or driven by bias. And for many, they were. But what could not be dismissed were the photos and footage themselves. What once appeared as hateful speculation was gradually viewed with more sympathy as Meghan's overall approach to privacy appeared increasingly inconsistent, especially considering how much her brand had come to rely on her maternal image. Adding more fuel to the fire was the birth of Archie itself. The announcement of his birth came hours after he had allegedly already been born. There was no hospital step photo, no time-stamped images, no confirmation of which hospital he was delivered in. No medical professionals made statements, no records were ever made public, and no attending staff ever came forward with anecdotes or eyewitness accounts. A stark contrast to the birth of William and Kate's children, which included precise timelines, public-facing obstetricians, and multiple appearances. Instead, Meghan and Harry released a vague birth announcement and a heavily filtered photograph taken inside Windsor Castle 2 days later. The nursemaid, whose presence would have validated the delivery context, was never named. Reporters were not allowed questions. The baby's face was mostly hidden. It wasn't just privacy, it was total control. Rumors of a surrogate began circulating more widely when independent investigators began scrutinizing legal and medical documentation. In the United States, high-profile surrogacies, such as those used by celebrities like Kim Kardashian or Nicole Kidman, often included official acknowledgments, surrogacy birth certificates, or post-delivery photos with surrogates present. Meghan and Harry never acknowledged or denied the possibility. That silence left a void. But perhaps the most alarming moment came in 2021 when Meghan claimed during the Oprah interview that she had been told her son would not be given a title, suggesting racial undertones within the royal institution. The public was deeply moved. Tears were shed. But it also placed heightened emotional weight on Archie's very existence. The child became a symbol of exclusion, of pain, of institutional cruelty. That's where the contradiction grew dangerous. If Archie had not been carried by Meghan, or if details of his birth were misrepresented, then that emotional cornerstone, that the institution had rejected her son, became far less stable. It didn't erase the hurt, but it changed the moral high ground on which she stood. And if surrogacy was involved, then why hide it? Surrogacy is not shameful. In today's world, many high-profile women use surrogates due to medical complications, age, career demands, or other personal reasons. What makes it controversial in this case is the alleged dishonesty. Meghan never addressed the surrogacy rumors. Not once. Not when they exploded on social media. Not during interviews. Not in her podcast. Not in the Netflix documentary. That avoidance only increased suspicion. Then came Lilibet's birth in 2021. And with it, a carbon copy of the same questions. No hospital photos. No details of delivery. No visible pregnancy timeline. No public sightings of Meghan visibly pregnant. No maternity photos. No friends or relatives confirming physical details. A quiet announcement of the birth. A delay in releasing a photograph. And a continued pattern of curated, distant imagery. Even Lilibet's name raised questions. Meghan and Harry claimed they had received Queen Elizabeth's blessing to use her nickname. The palace subtly denied that version, stating the Queen had been informed, not consulted. This inconsistency, paired with the child's sudden insertion into royal history via name, only added to the sense that Meghan and Harry were manufacturing a legacy that needed to appear seamlessly authentic. By the time the Netflix documentary aired, the audience had grown used to their method. Present children symbolically, not personally. A baby monitor here. A backlit figure toddling past a door there. A giggle off-screen. Lilibet's face was rarely shown. Archie's voice was overlaid with stock music. No family was seen visiting. No medical professionals were ever mentioned. It was motherhood without mess, childhood without chaos, a reality too clean to be believable. Inside palace circles, rumors quietly grew. Staffers who had once signed strict non-disclosure agreements began, over time, to let things slip. One former aide reportedly told a journalist off-record that there were very strict rules about how Meghan was to be addressed during her pregnancy, and that no one was ever allowed to refer to her belly directly. Another described a moment when an official posed the question, who signed off on the delivery certificate, and was quickly silenced. Still, no concrete evidence emerged. And that was part of the brilliance or cunning behind the Sussex media strategy. They offered just enough to suggest authenticity, but not enough to confirm or deny anything. It left everyone, from fans to critics to journalists, chasing shadows. Surrogacy isn't the issue. Secrecy is. Meghan has every right to choose how and when to share intimate aspects of her life. But by weaponizing her motherhood in the public sphere, turning it into a narrative about exile, persecution, and redemption, the omission of fundamental truths becomes a betrayal, not a boundary. In recent months, several respected investigative journalists have quietly confirmed that they had looked into the surrogacy angle and found walls everywhere, sealed medical records, unconfirmed hospital locations, and even blurred photos of medical visits. One British media outlet allegedly killed a story at the 11th hour after receiving legal pressure from a powerful American law firm representing the Sussexes. That article never saw the light of day. But whispers of it exist in journalist circles. With the drone footage now painting a disturbing picture of child absence, the surrogacy question has come back with a vengeance. And this time, it's not just fringe voices asking the question. It's mainstream culture commentators, pediatric specialists, former royal staffers, and most importantly, it's regular parents saying, none of this adds up. One popular podcast hosted by two mothers, both former nurses, devoted an entire episode to dissecting the visual timeline of Meghan's pregnancies. We're not judging her for using a surrogate, one host said. We're judging her for possibly lying about it while crying on Oprah about what her son wasn't given. If she faked the pregnancy, then her whole appeal to injustice gets a lot murkier. A shocking twist came when an anonymous source allegedly leaked that Meghan may have undergone a hysterectomy in her early 30s due to medical complications. That information, if true, would have made natural childbirth impossible, raising more serious questions about the pregnancies she claimed to have carried. No medical documents have been provided. No official denial has come from the Sussex team. The silence continues. At this point, the public isn't demanding answers because of curiosity. It's because of betrayal. The narrative sold to them, emotionally, visually, financially, doesn't align with what they're now seeing. And while Meghan and Harry might once have benefited from sympathy, they are now facing a far more dangerous emotion, disillusionment. The surrogacy rumors may never be proven. Meghan may never address them. But every day she doesn't, the gap between what she presented and what the public suspects grows wider. And in that gap, trust collapses. From the very first moment she stepped into the public eye as Prince Harry's partner, Meghan Markle was more than just a royal-to-be. She was a storyteller, an image curator, and a master strategist. Her journey from Hollywood actress to Duchess of Sussex was not a passive transition. It was a meticulously managed campaign that turned a woman from a cable television legal drama into one of the most talked about, polarizing figures on the global stage. And at the heart of this transformation was an unwavering control over her public narrative. It didn't start with the Oprah interview. It began much earlier, with her now-defunct blog, The Tig, where she published self-authored lifestyle pieces about fashion, food, and empowerment, all framed in her own voice. That blog was a window into how Meghan wanted the world to see her: stylish, soulful, reflective, articulate. Even in her acting years, she was already practicing the art of media shaping, writing about humanitarian trips, quoting Gandhi, and aligning herself with purpose-driven branding well before aligning with royalty. When the relationship with Prince Harry became public in 2016, the press attention was immediate and merciless. Some of the attacks were racially charged. Others were driven by classism or a general disdain for outsiders in royal circles. But through it all, Meghan maintained a tight rein over what she would and would not share. Publicly, she was poised and gracious. Privately, she and Harry were already drafting their own storyline, one that would later surface in documentaries, interviews, and books. The palace initially tried to manage Meghan's rise in the same way they handled all royal newcomers, by absorbing her into the structure, assigning her communications staff, and guiding her toward vetted talking points. But Meghan was no stranger to media machinery. She quickly outpaced palace strategy. According to former aides and insiders who have since spoken anonymously, Meghan preferred her own stylists, her own writers, and her own photographers. She insisted on controlling photo rights, reviewing press statements, and dictating public messaging. That instinct for narrative ownership was not inherently sinister. Many public figures seek similar control, especially when the stakes are high. But in Meghan's case, it went further. The line between public relations and personal mythology began to blur. One former royal staffer reportedly said, "With Meghan, nothing is spontaneous. Everything is choreographed. Even her silences are scripted." This may sound hyperbolic, but the pattern fits. Whether it was her wardrobe choices, wearing colors to match Diana, mimicking her mannerisms in interviews, or her speech cadence, which began to shift over time to a more theatrical delivery, everything appeared calibrated. This control reached a turning point with the 2021 Oprah Winfrey interview. Framed as an explosive truth-telling session, it was billed as a once-in-a-generation moment of emotional authenticity. Meghan appeared in a soft black dress, under a Californian sun, framed by greenery. She cried. She paused for dramatic effect. She told stories of suicidal ideation, racist questioning, and royal abandonment. The world gasped. It was powerful. It was devastating. It was also, as some later pointed out, strangely curated. Take, for example, the infamous claim that Archie was denied a royal title due to concerns over how dark his skin might be. The media ran with the quote, interpreting it as a direct charge of institutional racism. But upon closer examination, the claim was murky. There are specific royal protocols regarding titles that contradicted parts of Meghan's narrative. Royal historians, even sympathetic ones, later admitted that some elements didn't line up with constitutional precedent. Yet by the time the fact checks rolled out, the emotional impact had already landed. Meghan knew exactly how to seed a narrative. By focusing on feelings rather than provable facts, she captured public sympathy in a way no royal outsider had ever done. It was performance with purpose. And it worked, at least for a time. But the very control that enabled Meghan to rise also created cracks. Every controlled message, every managed image, began to invite suspicion. The public started noticing inconsistencies. The stories Meghan told about family estrangement didn't align with public records. Her narratives about the royal family's indifference didn't match leaked emails and schedules that showed ongoing support. Her statements about wanting privacy clashed with multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify. Slowly, her tightly held narrative began to resemble a house of cards, still standing, but increasingly fragile. One of the most striking examples of Meghan's media control came in the form of her podcast, Archetypes. Touted as a platform to explore and dismantle labels applied to women, the podcast featured guests like Serena Williams and Mariah Carey. But behind the scenes, it was Meghan's show literally and figuratively. Reports later revealed that most questions were pre-approved. Conversations were heavily edited, and Meghan's own voiceovers were often added later, creating an illusion of spontaneous interaction that didn't quite match reality. More disturbing were claims that Meghan often dictated how guests could describe her in promotional materials. One industry insider claimed, her team was adamant, don't call her former actress. Say activist or visionary. In media packages, Meghan's identity was always steered toward empowerment, resilience, and philanthropy, never privilege, performance, or personal ambition. But perhaps the most obvious and controversial example of Meghan's narrative control came during the Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan. Billed as a behind-the-scenes look into their lives, the series was a slow-motion PR reel, crafted with mood lighting, emotional voiceovers, and an almost aggressive insistence on framing the couple as victims of every institution they encountered. The children were shown just enough to provoke interest, but never enough to allow confirmation. Meghan was filmed reading to Archie under a tree, baking with him in a kitchen, walking with Harry on a beach. But the footage was stylized, slow, and segmented. Faces were blurred, backs were turned. Viewers couldn't help but wonder, is this a documentary or a cinematic reenactment? Once again, the same question surfaced. What is real, and what is curated? Meghan's grip on narrative has also extended into the legal realm. She and Harry have filed multiple lawsuits against tabloids, photographers, and even individuals who shared personal stories. They've gone after unauthorized photos, blocked drone footage, and demanded retractions. While some of these actions were justified, particularly in cases of harassment, the pattern of legal control only reinforced the idea that Meghan's version of the truth was not just carefully crafted, but legally enforced. This kind of control creates an ecosystem where no narrative can challenge her version. Former friends and family members who diverged from her script were quickly discredited. Meghan's father, Thomas Markle, once sympathetic in public eyes, was recast as toxic after giving interviews. Her half-sister Samantha was portrayed as an opportunist. Childhood friends were rebranded as clout chasers. The result was that Meghan's version of events, who supported her, who betrayed her, and who harmed her, became the only version left standing. In more recent years, this control has extended to what she doesn't say. Silence, for Meghan, has become as powerful a tool as speech. When surrogacy rumors exploded, she said nothing. When questions about Archie and Lilibet's visibility went viral, she said nothing. When the drone footage showed a pristine, childless estate, she said nothing. The silence wasn't empty, it was strategic. Because in the absence of answers, the public is forced to fill in the blanks. And for a time, that worked in her favor. But control is a double-edged sword. When you craft every message, people expect you to respond when the story turns against you. And now, as doubt spreads, as trust erodes, Meghan's silence no longer reads as poise. It reads as evasion. Critics are not just asking where the children are. They're asking whether anything Meghan has presented is real. The curated photographs, the slow-motion family videos, the voiceover confessions about pain and healing. Was it a genuine account of a woman reclaiming her story? Or was it a tightly packaged narrative designed to obscure rather than reveal? The truth may lie somewhere in between. Meghan may genuinely believe she's telling her truth. But the selective editing, the choreographed visuals, the lack of spontaneity all suggest a person more concerned with perception than transparency. Even loyal fans are beginning to wonder. One viral TikTok video, posted by a woman who once defended Meghan relentlessly, now carries the caption, "I wanted to believe every word. But now I don't know what's real." And that's the danger with absolute narrative control. When it begins to crack, it doesn't shatter, it collapses. Because people don't feel lied to by accident. They feel manipulated by design. Meghan once described herself as a woman silenced by the crown. But now, as the weight of her own silence grows heavier, the question is no longer what the institution did to her. It's what she's done with the platform she claimed was for healing, and whether the truth ever had a place in it. If Meghan Markle has become the orchestrator of narrative, then Prince Harry has long occupied the role of its most loyal soldier. Through every twist in their public journey, from the contentious exit from royal duties to the emotional Oprah interview and the Netflix docuseries, Harry has stood firmly at Meghan's side, sometimes even more passionately than expected. Yet, as the storm surrounding their children's visibility and the drone footage controversy continues to grow, a deeper, more uncomfortable question now emerges. Is Prince Harry merely a silent bystander? Or has he become an active participant in shaping, and possibly sustaining, a story that no longer holds up to public scrutiny? To answer this, we must first look at Harry's transformation over the past decade. From the party prince of the 2000s, known for missteps, Vegas nights, and tabloid headlines, Harry began a dramatic rebranding in the mid-2010s. His work with veterans, his advocacy for mental health, and his increased emotional transparency marked a clear departure from his earlier self. And when Meghan entered his life, Harry's evolution accelerated. In interviews, he often credited Meghan for saving him. He spoke candidly about therapy, grief, and the long shadow of Princess Diana's death. He began calling out the British tabloid press directly. He positioned himself as a protector, not just of Meghan, but of a new kind of royal masculinity, vulnerable, present, emotionally literate. But as his emotional visibility increased, so too did his loyalty to Meghan's version of the truth. It wasn't just that he agreed with her, it was that he adopted her lens completely. Her enemies became his. Her grievances became his crusade. This was most evident during the Oprah interview, where Harry, sitting beside Meghan, confirmed much of what she alleged without offering details of his own. When Meghan spoke of the institution's alleged racism, Harry didn't expand, he nodded. When Meghan spoke of suicidal thoughts, Harry admitted regret but didn't dispute anything. In every segment, he reinforced her words. even when some contradicted previous public records or palace communications. That silence might have initially seemed like compassion. But as the timeline progresses, and particularly in light of the current crisis, Harry's silence begins to look less like support and more like avoidance. Because now the questions are not abstract. They are specific. Where are Archie and Lilibet? Why have they not been seen? Why does their home show no sign of them? Why do Harry's own words about parenthood in his memoir Spare feel so emotionally distant? There's a particular passage in Spare where Harry describes holding Archie for the first time. He calls the moment surreal, like touching light. But then he immediately transitions into a memory about Diana, then a paragraph about the press, and then, rather abruptly, to a discussion of palace hierarchy. The baby disappears from the emotional thread, as if Harry cannot anchor to him. There are more words in Spare about Harry's frostbite in the Arctic than about the birth of either of his children. This absence becomes even more glaring when compared to Harry's descriptions of his military years or his time with Meghan. His affection for his wife is tangible on the page. His grief over his mother is palpable. But his relationship with fatherhood is abstract, distant, and oddly functional. He speaks more of protecting them from the media than playing with them in the garden. More about their future in America than their present joy in daily life. It's as if his children are a concept, an obligation, not an experience. This emotional distance didn't go unnoticed. Critics of the book noted that the children function more like symbolic anchors in Harry's story than real people. They are mentioned when needed, to reinforce his departure from the royal family, to emphasize his break from royal tradition, but they never seem to breathe within the narrative. There are no messy breakfasts, no tantrums, no goofy bedtime routines. There is no fatherhood emotion. Now, in light of the drone footage showing a home devoid of childlike chaos, these earlier patterns take on new weight. If the children truly do not live at the Montecito estate, or if they are being raised elsewhere, or worse, if they are not who the world was led to believe, then Harry's omissions become more than just stylistic. They become revealing. The other complicating factor is Harry's own war with the media. For years, he has insisted that he left the UK to protect his family from tabloid intrusion. He's taken legal action against multiple publications, often citing privacy and psychological harm. And yet, this aggressive defense of privacy is selectively applied. When promoting his memoir, Harry revealed details as intimate as losing his virginity in a field, his drug use, and private conversations with family.